Ladies and gentlemen, let me say how glad I am to be present with you via technology, courtesy of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, who have invited me to deliver a lecture in honor of Engineer Charles Mbanefo. Engineer Mbanefo deserves the honor that he has received over the years. He was not only a pioneering engineer in Nigeria, but is recognized within the continent of Africa and beyond because of his trailblazing activities in a field which for a long time was considered arcane. I feel humbled to have been invited to share my thoughts as we commemorate this great individual who has served his society, his country, his continent, and the world with dedication and in a sterling manner. When one speaks on the occasion to remember a man such as Engineer Mbanefo, one's mind travels far and wide. One's mind inspects different areas and one asks oneself, should I talk about engineering which he was known for? Should I talk about the contemporary issues that now hamstring the continent of Africa? Because it is not lost on me that I'm speaking at a time when COVID-19 is devastating the continent of Africa. So much so that traveling, which we took for granted over many years, must now be preceded with a COVID test. The traveling, which was so easy a few years ago, is now characterized by great difficulties. But yet again, it is in the midst of adversity that the best comes out of the human mind and human heart. I am glad that I'm present with you virtually. And I have asked myself, what should I speak about on an occasion such as this? Should I speak about engineering and its significance in Africa and the world? And I told myself, there are better men and women qualified to speak about engineering because I'm not one. I've asked myself, should I speak about the pandemic, COVID-19, that has and continues to ravage the world? Yet again I say, I'm not a doctor, and therefore I'm unqualified to speak with the requisite authority and intellectual firepower. I've therefore chosen to be eclectic in my presentation, with the intention solely of animating your thoughts in the hope that ultimately the idea that I put on the table will not only cross-fertilize your very own or cross-pollinate your very own, but will provide us with a menu out of which, as we think about the continent of Africa, we'll be able to pick and choose the things that we ought to grapple with as we go through this pandemic and as we commemorate Engineer Charles Mbanefo. What is it that has happened in the last 1 year that deserves attention? What deserves attention, in my view, is that Africa must now move in the direction of defining herself and defining her agenda in all the critical areas of human development. For too long now, our continent has been dependent on other civilizations. For too long now, the continent of Africa has been a continent which receives that which the world has rejected. For too long now, the continent has been seen as a political, economic, and social lightweight. For too long now, Africa has not participated in the arena of technology, discovery, and innovation as she should. For too long now, Africa has been treated as the underdog. And I hold the view that when we are gathered here, those of you who are present physically and those of you who are present virtually, it is time for us to recognize that the long-term health of Africa not only requires but demands that the mother continent must now wake up to the reality that the world requires that we up the ante in all the critical areas that will see us catapulted to the orbit of human development. And I'm happy that I'm talking to you during a year when Africa, through its existing institutions, have come up with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area tells us that in a few years' time, speaking to Africa Agenda 2063, all the Bismarckian borders that were imposed on us in the year 1884 and 1885 in Berlin will exist only for purposes of administration. That it will be possible for a person who is trading in Abuja to access the markets in Cape Town in South Africa and to move without let and hindrance from Cape Town in South Africa to Djibouti, and from Djibouti to move to Dakar, Senegal, and from Dakar, Senegal to move to Bangui in Central African Republic, and thereafter to move in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, as if we lived in one country. That is a monumental development which we ought to remind ourselves as being critical at this time, and when we celebrate the man in whose honor we gather here, Charles Mbanefo, who belonged to a profession, the profession of engineering, which knows no bounds and knows no boundaries when it is being executed for the benefit of humanity. It is also not lost on me that during this year, Africans are beginning to talk about their involvement in the arena of innovation and invention. You know, ladies and gentlemen, as we are going through the pain of COVID, Africa has had to rely on other civilizations for the almighty vaccine. If we are not relying on the Chinese with their Sinopharm, we are relying on the Russians with their Sputnik. And if we are not relying on the Russians, we are relying on the British with their AstraZeneca. And if we are not relying on the British, we are relying on the Germans with their Pfizer. And if we are not relying on the Germans, we are relying on the Americans with their Johnson & Johnson and Moderna. How can it be that a continent which has produced so many great minds cannot be in the forefront of invention and discovery and execution if little Cuba can do it? We are gathered here in honor of a man who belongs to a profession whose greatest claim is about discovery. Why shouldn't Africa be a continent that engages in these critical arenas that will change the lives of our people? It can be done and it must be done. And this is the occasion at which I'm putting it on the table that it behooves us to do it. You know, you will remember on the 27th day of April, the year 2001, Africa gathered in Abuja, Nigeria, and came up with the Abuja Protocol, under whose theme it was agreed that African countries do dedicate 15% of their budget to the health sector. COVID has now demonstrated to us that we did not. COVID has found us naked. COVID has exposed our health systems. COVID has exposed our economies. COVID has exposed the fragility of our societies. COVID has exposed the fragility of our societal cohesion. COVID has exposed the fragility of our aviation sector. COVID has exposed the fragility of our economies. COVID has found us out. And that is why, as I talk about the many things that we can do and must do, I'm also reminded that it is critical and necessary that African countries must now begin to engage in inventions and innovation beyond the medical field that I've talked about and go into different arenas. We must be able to use our intellectual wherewithal and our intellectual firepower, not to rely on China and Korea and Japan, so that when we are gathered as we are and we talk of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, our engineering is beyond paper qualification. We must be civil engineers whose greatest claim to fame is that they can preside over the extension of road networks across Africa so that we can move with ease. We must be electrical engineers whose greatest claim to fame is that they are presiding over an Africa which is well lit, an Africa that can use our resources, the sun, the wind, and all those in order to light up Africa so that she must not be called the dark continent. An Africa whose chemical engineers are present and will not rely on Italians and French to deal with our oil and will not be inviting Shell and ExxonMobil and Elf. An Africa whose biochemical engineers will be present and will be in the forefront of innovation so that we are not relying on the Germans. That is the Africa that I'm talking about. That is the Africa that I believe that you members of the Nigerian Society of Engineers must be thinking about. And you must remember that you, Nigeria, you are the biggest country in terms of population in the continent of Africa, and indeed, the largest economy. What are you doing as engineering professional? What pride are you giving to Engineer Charles Mbanefo? The time for romanticization is over. This is the time when we must go into the hard ground of reality and do the things that will change the continent of Africa. And you, ladies and gentlemen, will ask, why is this necessary? Why is invention and innovation necessary? We live in the age of technology. We live in the age of information. We live in the age where it is true that if we don't doubt, we can't think. I remember, even as I speak, those famous words of René Descartes when he says, dubito ego cogito, cogito ego sum. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. And I'm inviting those of you who are present here that this is the time to think, and think in a manner that will inject practical activities in the lives of the continent of Africa. Dear brothers and sisters, this continent can be great. This continent must be great. But this continent will only be great if she is able to discover within herself the things that will make our sons and daughters rise. You know, as I speak to you, behind me, there are the portraits of great Africans. The portrait of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, speaking in 1961, he told his Ghanaians, and by extension Africans, now that we are beginning to regain our political independence, Africa will only be great if, in addition to all else, because we had said that we seek ye first the political kingdom, we have sought and are beginning to gain it. But she will only be great when our sons and daughters begin to embrace science and technology. Yes, also behind me is the great Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Speaking in 1967, he said, the education that we are giving to our young men and women must be the kind of education that will change them inside out. so that they are able to recognize that the knowledge they acquire is of no value unless that knowledge is deployed for the benefit of the continent of Africa. And I must not be told, nor must I be reminded, that science and technology is at the very heart of that societal revolution. Also sitting behind me in a portrait form is Madiba, Nelson Mandela, who said almost the same thing in reminding his people that education is the game changer. Education is the single thing that takes a child out of poverty and hoists him or her on a higher pedestal so that he or she can dine with kings and queens, if kings and queens are the standard at all. And to my extreme left, the man for whom I am named, Patrice Emery Lumumba, who in 1960 said that when the people of Congo are writing their new story, it will be a story about how men and women engaging in activities that will change their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are gathered here to remember Engineer Charles Mbanefo. We are remembering him because during his tenure, during his tour of service, he was not satisfied with just being an engineer. He was not satisfied simply with the thing that affected him and his family. He was concerned about Nigeria. He was concerned about Africa. He was concerned about the world. And that is why he was present when the Nigeria Society of Engineers was being formed, because he knew that in unity lies strength. We are celebrating him because he planted certain ideas in our mind, and that we desire that those ideas should be produced in a manner that is going to benefit Nigeria. We are celebrating him because men such as him inspire us. I urge all of us who are present here, as we commemorate this great individual who pioneered many things in the continent of Africa, let us remember that it is our duty to do what we must, to play our role in the quest to make our continent great, to make our people be respected as they ought to be. I am happy to have been invited to share my thoughts, which I have presented to you, as I said at the very outset, eclectically, in the hope that it will animate something in you, so that when you think about engineering, you think about its potential impact in the continent of Africa as an underwriter of Africa's great leap forward. God bless you. Let's see how it looks.